Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to another God of War video, with us drawing closer and closer to the release date of Ragnarok. Today I wanted to focus on a particular plot point that has been lingering in the Norse universe, the Ragnarok Paradox. Now currently, we do know that this particular series of games is caught in a somewhat paradoxical loop, where the cycle of creation and destruction seems infinite in the form of Ragnarok. So whilst we may have only just been introduced to the Norse world, this technically isn't the very first time Kratos nor Atreus have been somewhat a part of this prophecy, as we know now that Jormungandr and Fenrir are living, breathing proof of a previous existing timeline. Or if we really wish to deepen this idea, timelines. As right now, we currently do not know how long this loop has actually gone on for. In today's video, we will be theorizing how this loop could possibly work, and the paradox behind it. And if so possible, is there actually a way to break it, stopping the endless cycle of Ragnarok, and therefore giving the Norse series a somewhat definitive end? But before we dive down this absolutely insane timeline-filled hellhole, trust me, it's going to get very confusing at points. Today guys, I would super appreciate it if we could first get this video to 500 likes. It's an incredible way of not only supporting this video, but this channel out as a whole. It may be a minor thing, but it really does go a long way. And if you like what you see here and want to see more God of War content, please by all means do not forget to subscribe, as well as tick that bell to stay up to date with everything going on here. So without any further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now first off, let's actually get to talking about where this idea actually derived from. Because whilst the God of War series has established Ragnarok is a loop and cycle, let's not forget that these games are all loosely based off its Nordic source material, one that does actually have two different outcomes for Ragnarok, opposed to the very much well-known traditional ending, where Asgard gets destroyed during the Ragnarok cycle. Instead of the world starting anew, the world instead continues to live on. Here, Midgard is inherited by the world of man. With the gods somewhat gone, they now guide their own fates. But not all of the Aesir and Vanir gods do perish, as Magni and Modi and a handful of other gods do survive, deciding at the end of it all to retreat to the lands of Illithir. So in a way, they do kind of relinquish their roles and titles. Although Ragnarok is over, that doesn't mean that evil is entirely gone, because when Asgard was destroyed and the world tree was shaken by Surtr's primordial flame, the evil dragon at the base of Yggdrasil, Nidhogg, is finally able to break free from its roots, now reigning across the sky as the world's last and final evil to exist. But his time will not last, as much like Ragnarok, he is also prophesized to rise and fall, being the very last evil in the world to be cleansed. So with me bringing in this idea, how exactly could this translate over to the God of War universe? Well, let's quickly touch on the current timeline and what we do know of this particular loop. In the present, we exist in one of many different timelines, caught in the Ouroboros of Ragnarok, with the world serpents being very present extremely early on. It indicates and shows that we exist effectively in timeline 2. However, the big mystery surrounding this is, how is this possible? Well, that is the hard parts to pin down. Whilst not entirely clear or explained, because it's ancient space tree magic, I believe that the loop is due to the magical properties of Yggdrasil itself, being tied to the root of its own universe, as each pantheon somewhat operates by its own rules. After eons of this cycle presumably going on, it does imply that the tree is a self-replenishing source of power. I firmly believe that it is the magical properties of the tree itself that allows for said loop to continue from start to finish. And even then, the tree itself is not centered around a particular being, despite what Odin might want to make you think, with how he attempts to manipulate time and fate. So I think the only way to break this loop and make the present timeline the definitive and final one is by literally destroying Yggdrasil itself. I know, it sounds pretty insane, but can this actually be done? Well, I believe it comes down to two important primordial figures: Surtr, the fire giant of Muspelheim, and Nidhogg, the eater of worlds. To establish this idea, let's first take a look at the Jötnar edition cloth mat, as it is a realistic depiction of the Norse realms and how they are layered on top of each other. Now, as we can all see, Asgard does sit at the very top, and Nidhogg is located in the bottom right, depicting him as tangled in the roots of the world tree. Now, the reason I'm purposely pointing this out is because Surtr is destined to rise all the way from Muspelheim to plunge his sword imbued with the primordial flame deep into the heart of Asgard, destroying not only it, but leaving the realm itself in absolute tatters. The damage is so great that it does singe the top of Yggdrasil. So, in traditional depictions, pretty much all gods do perish, but unlike the other ending, Nidhogg does not escape the base of Yggdrasil, still being imprisoned to its base, to live through yet another loop. That is, unless the loop is broken. I think Nidhogg's release is a key element in breaking the cycle. But how is this possible? Well, this is where Helheim comes into play. Being the lowest point of the world tree itself, the evil dragon is actually known to be imprisoned just beneath it. He actually plays a pretty big role in Helheim's ecosystem, serving as a devil of sorts, feeding on the souls of the truly wicked and damned, sealed in the depths of Naustron, a level where oath breakers, rapists, and the vilest scum of the earth are imprisoned. So the next question is there a way to free him? Well, that's the hard part of this theory, as the only time on record he has ever been released is during the end of Ragnarok itself, as the world tree has been weakened enough that he is able to snap free. But I also think there is another way of writing this in narratively. Of course, in Hell, it's a desolate, cold, and unnerving realm, one that renders the frost properties of the Leviathan axe completely useless. The Blades of Chaos, on the other hand, is a completely different conversation, operating on an entirely different magical system from Olympus. I believe that it is possible to have Kratos travel to Muspelheim and harness a fraction of the power of the primordial flame. By imbuing the Blades of Chaos with such power, not only is it stronger, but the blades themselves should be strong enough to cut away and weaken the branches of Yggdrasil, setting Nidhogg free. So I think, with Surtr plunging his blade into the heart of Asgard, at the same time Nidhogg is released, him rising up through the center of the world tree, as it is effectively split at both ends, could in fact break the loop, if it is indeed Yggdrasil that is responsible for the cycle of Ragnarok. But if this is done, what is the cost? Well, once again, I will have to somewhat theorize a way this could work. With the world tree severed, I imagine one of two things could possibly happen here. The first is that the realms would simply be cut off from each other, operating in their own separate worlds, with no connection to each other, as they are now, each their own separate individual planes. Or the other option, and the much more bleak ending, is that all 9 realms would fall into worlds of despair and chaos. With their link severed to that of the world tree, their home could simply end up withering and dying. as it has lost its source of somewhat magical nutrition. With all of this said and explored, is this idea possible? Could we see such an outcome actually happen? Well, I'm not too sure. Whilst I do firmly believe that a lot of these ideas are possible, as they are rooted in both the game's established lore and its mythological counterpart, I think considering the tone and nature of how the series is somewhat maturing and evolving, the ending may be a bit too dark. But since we're dealing with time travel, loops, paradoxes, and multiple avenues of how Ragnarok could unfold, let's humor the idea at the very least of how things could go possibly very, very wrong. I think for something like this to happen is if Kratos once again is pushed far over that edge. So much so to the point where he renounces his current self in favor of his Ghost of Sparta persona. So from what you can tell, I am obviously hinting at the idea of Atreus dying, which it itself is also a concept and idea that is indeed rooted in possibility, because looking back at Norse mythology once again as a source of influence and information, during the final battle, Loki is one of the many gods that do fall, trading blows with Heimdall and later succumbing to his wounds. If something like this were to happen, not saying it will, I think Kratos would effectively pull a God of War 3 on us, but not just on the pantheon. I would see him destroying the entire world tree itself. But as we have seen, Kratos has grown a lot since God of War 3. So although I don't see this scenario really happening, it is at least fun to talk about and discuss, as honestly, with Kratos, the idea of something like this is at least always on the table. The question is, how ultimately do we push him to this place? That mostly covers things regarding this topic. But instead of me droning on, what do you think will happen with the loop itself? Do you think in Ragnarok it will actually be broken? Or do you feel that the cycle will continue to turn after this point? Please do comment down in the section below, as I'd honestly love to hear your own ideas and thoughts on this. It's such an interesting and compelling idea when we are dealing with time travel like this, because whilst it is a little bit strict in nature, there is always freedom in the unknown. So take what you will from that statement. And again, I don't see every single bit of information here coming to fruition, but I am interested if anything I mention here does bleed through in some way, shape or form. But for now guys, this has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting as Ragnarok comes for us all. Take care everyone, I'll see you soon.